The ship dropped out of hyperspace with a soft hum, and Commander Zevol pressed his scaled face against the viewport. Below him, a blue and green world turned slowly in the darkness of space. Earth, the forbidden planet. The quarantine world that no one was supposed to visit. Zevol smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. He was Cathari, a reptilian species known throughout the galaxy for their love of profit and their hatred of rules. The Galactic Concord had declared Earth off-limits 10,000 years ago, but Zevol did not care about old laws. He cared about money, and the black market paid very well for pre-collapse artifacts. "Commander," said his second officer, a nervous young Cathari named Thomasis, "are you certain about this?" "The penalties for violating quarantine are severe." "The penalties are only severe if we get caught," Zevol replied. He turned away from the viewport and walked toward the command chair. "And who is going to catch us?" "The Concord patrols this sector once every 50 years. We will be gone long before they return." The ship was called the Silent Prophet, and it carried a crew of 42. Most of them were criminals, outcasts, or desperate souls who had nowhere else to go. They had followed Zevol to the edge of known space because he promised them wealth beyond imagination. Ancient human artifacts sold for enormous prices on the black market. Collectors and researchers paid fortunes for even small pieces of technology from the lost civilization. Zevol had spent 3 years searching old archives and forgotten databases for information about Earth. Most records had been destroyed or sealed, but he had found fragments, hints, whispers of something buried beneath the planet's largest ocean. Something that the Galactic Concord had tried very hard to hide. "Take us down," he ordered. "Follow the coordinates I provided. We are looking for a structure beneath the water." The Silent Prophet descended through Earth's atmosphere. Clouds parted around the ship as it dropped lower and lower. Zevol watched the surface grow closer, vast oceans of deep blue water, continents covered in green forests and brown deserts. It was a beautiful world, he admitted to himself. A shame that its people had destroyed themselves before they could join the galactic community. Or so the official history claimed. Zevol had always been suspicious of official histories. They were usually written by the winners, and the winners usually had something to hide. The ship splashed down into the Pacific Ocean and continued descending. Lights activated on the hull, cutting through the dark water. Strange creatures swam past the viewports, fish and whales and things that Zevol had no names for. Earth's oceans were full of life, even after 10,000 years. "Commander," Thomasis said, his voice tight with excitement, "I am detecting a structure ahead. It is massive. The scanners cannot determine its full size." Zevol leaned forward in his chair. On the main screen, he could see it now, a vast shape rising from the ocean floor. It was black and smooth, built from materials that the scanners could not identify. Towers and domes and strange angular shapes stretched across the seabed for kilometers in every direction. "By the ancestors," whispered one of the crew members. "What is this place?" Zevol did not answer. He was staring at the structure with wide eyes, his heart beating fast in his chest. This was bigger than he had imagined. Much bigger. This was not just an artifact or a ruin. This was something else entirely. "Find an entrance," he ordered. "We are going inside." The ship circled the structure for nearly an hour before they found a way in. A massive doorway that had been sealed shut but had cracked open over the millennia. The Silent Prophet squeezed through the gap and emerged into a vast chamber filled with air. Somehow, impossibly, the interior of the structure had remained dry and preserved. Zevol assembled a team of 12 and led them out of the ship. They wore environmental suits and carried weapons, though Zevol doubted they would need them. Nothing had lived in this place for 10,000 years. The interior of the structure was dark, but their lights revealed walls covered in strange symbols and images. Zevo recognized some of them as human writing, though he could not read it. Other symbols were completely unfamiliar geometric patterns and flowing lines that seemed to shift and move in the flickering light. This technology, Thomas said, running his scanner over a nearby wall. Commander, I do not understand these readings. The materials are unknown. The energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases. That is why we are here, Zevo replied. To find things that are unknown. To sell them to people who want to understand them. They walked deeper into the structure. The corridors were wide and tall, built for creatures larger than humans, or perhaps built to intimidate. Zevo had seen similar architecture in ancient military installations, designed to make visitors feel small and powerless after an hour of walking. They reached a central chamber. It was circular, with a domed ceiling that stretched high above their heads. Strange machines lined the walls, covered in dust but still intact. And in the center of the room, raised on a platform of black stone, stood a single object that made Zevo stop breathing. It was a capsule of some kind, a stasis pod, and inside it, visible through a transparent cover, lay a human figure. Impossible, Thomas whispered. The humans all died. The records say, the records lie, Zevo said. He walked toward the pod, his boots echoing on the stone floor. The human inside was male, tall and muscular, with dark hair and pale skin. He looked young, perhaps 30 years old by human standards. He wore strange armor that seemed to flow like liquid metal, covering his body from neck to toe. But it was the human's face that caught Zevo's attention. Even in sleep, even after 10,000 years, there was something about that face. Something dangerous. Something powerful. Commander, look at this. One of his crew members was examining the base of the platform. There is writing here. Old human script. Zevo walked around the pod and looked at the inscription. His translator implant struggled with the ancient language, but after a moment, the words became clear. Sentinel-01. The Guardian. Last defender of Earth. May he wake when the world needs him most. Guardian, Zevo said softly. The words sent a chill down his spine, though he did not know why. What were you guarding against, human? What were you protecting your world from? Commander, Thomas said urgently. We should leave. We should take what we can carry and leave immediately. This place. Something is wrong about this place. Zevo shook his head. Do you understand what this is worth? A living human from the pre-collapse era? The collectors would pay billions. We would be rich beyond our wildest dreams. If he is even still alive, another crew member said. 10,000 years in stasis. No system could maintain life for that long. Zevo reached out and touched the surface of the pod. It was warm under his fingers, humming with hidden energy. The systems are still active. I can feel it. He is alive in there. He should have been more careful. He should have studied the pod before touching it. But greed made him careless, and his fingers found a small panel on the side of the capsule. When he pressed it, the panel lit up with a soft blue glow. What did you do? Thomas demanded. I do not know. I did not mean to. The entire chamber began to shake. The machines along the walls hummed to life, lights flickering on across their surfaces. The dust of 10,000 years fell from the ceiling as ancient systems activated for the first time since the collapse. And then a voice spoke. It came from everywhere at once, echoing through the chamber in a language that Zevo's translator could barely process. Awakening protocol initiated. Threat assessment in progress. Non-human life forms detected. Guardian revival commencing. We need to leave, Thomas shouted. Now, but it was too late. The stasis pod began to open, the transparent cover sliding back with a soft hiss. The human inside took a breath, his first breath in 10,000 years, and his eyes opened. They were blue, bright blue, like the sky of Earth on a clear day. and they were looking directly at Zeval. The commander tried to run. He turned and sprinted toward the exit, his crew members scrambling after him. But the human moved faster than anything Zeval had ever seen. One moment he was lying in the pod, and the next moment he was standing in front of them, blocking the doorway. "Who are you?" the human asked. His voice was rough from 10,000 years of silence, but there was strength in it. Power. "Why have you come to this place?" Zeval's crew members raised their weapons, but the human did not seem concerned. He looked at the guns with something like curiosity, then turned his attention back to Zeval. "Answer me. I will not ask again." We are explorers," Zeval said. His voice was shaking. He could not help it. There was something about this human that filled him with terror. "We came to study the ruins. We did not know anyone was here." The human studied him for a long moment. Then he looked past Zeval at the machines that were coming to life throughout the chamber. His expression changed from confusion to understanding to something that might have been grief. "How long?" he asked quietly. "How long have I been asleep?" 10,000 years, Thomas answered. "By the standard galactic calendar." The human closed his eyes. For a moment, he looked tired, ancient, broken. But then his eyes opened again, and the moment passed. 10,000 years, he repeated. "And Earth? What happened to Earth? What happened to my people?" Zeval did not want to answer. He knew that the answer would not make this creature happy. But the human was staring at him with those bright blue eyes, and Zeval found that he could not lie. "Your civilization collapsed," he said. "The humans who survived, they forgot everything. They live in small tribes now, scattered across the planet. They have no technology, no cities, no memory of what they once were." The human said nothing, but his hands clenched into fists, and the liquid metal armor on his body seemed to shift and flow in response to his emotions. "And the galaxy?" he asked. "The Galactic Concord? Do they still exist?" "Yes, they rule most of known space. Did they help? When Earth fell, did they send aid? Did they try to save my people?" Zeval hesitated. He did not know the answer to that question. The official records said nothing about rescue attempts or humanitarian missions. They simply stated that human civilization had collapsed due to internal conflicts and environmental disasters. But the human seemed to read the answer in his silence. His expression hardened, and something cold entered his eyes. "I see," he said softly. "I understand." He turned away from Zeval and walked toward a large console in the center of the chamber. His fingers moved across the controls with practiced ease, and screens flickered to life above the console. Data streamed across them, words and numbers and images that Zeval could not understand. "What are you doing?" Zeval asked. "Learning," the human replied. "Catching up on 10,000 years of history." He paused, his eyes fixed on one of the screens. "And preparing. Preparing for what?" The human turned to look at him, and Zeval saw something in those blue eyes that made him take a step backward. It was not anger. It was not hatred. It was something worse. It was purpose. "Your masters in the Galactic Concord wanted Earth to die," the human said. "They wanted humanity to fade away and be forgotten. But they made a mistake. They forgot about us. They forgot about the Guardians." He pressed a final button on the console, and the entire structure shook. Somewhere far above them, Zeval heard machinery activating massive systems that had been dormant for millennia coming back to life. "What have you done?" Thomas screamed. "I have announced my return," the human said. "I have told the galaxy that Earth is no longer undefended, and I have activated the planetary defense grid." He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "You should leave now. Go back to your masters. Tell them that the Guardian has awakened. Tell them that Earth remembers. Zevil did not need to be told twice. He ran. His crew ran with him. They sprinted through the corridors of the ancient structure, back to their ship, and within minutes, the silent prophet was rising up through the ocean toward the surface. As they broke through the clouds and entered orbit, Zevil looked down at the planet below, and he saw something that made his blood run cold. Lights were appearing across Earth's surface. Thousands of them. Tens of thousands. Ancient installations that had been hidden underground were activating, their systems coming online for the first time in 10,000 years. Satellites were launching from hidden bases, spreading out across the planet's orbit. Weapons platforms were powering up, their targeting systems scanning the stars. And from the center of it all, from the structure beneath the ocean, a single transmission pulsed outward into the void. It traveled at faster than light speeds, spreading across the galaxy like ripples in a pond. The message was simple. Just a few words in the old human language, translated automatically into every known tongue. Guardian Protocol reactivated. Earth Defense Grid online. The Lost Guardian has awakened. Zevil watched the message spread outward toward the stars. And for the first time in his long career, he felt genuine fear. He had come to Earth looking for treasure. Instead, he had found something far more valuable and far more dangerous. He had awakened a monster from the ancient past, a weapon that the galaxy had tried to forget. And now that weapon was awake, and it remembered everything. Across the galaxy, in council chambers and military headquarters and royal palaces, beings of 1,000 different species received the transmission. Most of them did not understand what it meant. They saw only strange words from a dead world. But the eldest among them, the ones who had been alive during the ancient wars, the ones who remembered what humans had once been, they understood. And they were afraid. In the Great Hall of the Galactic Concord, where representatives from 10,000 worlds gathered to govern the galaxy, an ancient being called the Orm-Dash Ambassador rose from its seat. It was old beyond measure, a creature of crystal and light that had watched empires rise and fall for longer than most species had existed. It spoke only 4 words, but those 4 words silenced the entire assembly. The Guardian has returned. And across the galaxy, in that moment, everything changed. The stars had not seen a Guardian in 10,000 years. They had forgotten what those warriors were capable of. They had convinced themselves that the old stories were exaggerations, myths, legends with no basis in reality. They were about to remember. The lost Guardian of Earth was awake, and the galaxy would learn to fear again. The Guardian stood alone in the central chamber of the Citadel, surrounded by screens that showed him the history of the last 10,000 years. His name was Marcus Kane, though he had not spoken that name aloud in longer than most civilizations had existed. He had been born in a small town on the eastern coast of North America, the son of a farmer and a teacher. That life seemed like a dream now, a story that had happened to someone else. He watched the data scroll past his eyes, and with each passing moment, his heart grew heavier. The Citadel's archives contained everything, every secret, every lie, every terrible truth that the galaxy had tried to bury. And the truth was worse than Marcus had imagined. 12,000 years ago, humanity had been on the verge of greatness. They had developed technology that surpassed anything the Galactic Concord possessed. They had learned to manipulate space and time in ways that other species could barely understand. And they had created the Guardians, a small group of enhanced soldiers designed to protect not just Earth, but the entire galaxy. Marcus remembered those days. He remembered the training, the surgeries, the genetic modifications that had transformed him from an ordinary human into something more. The Guardian program had taken volunteers from every nation on Earth, young men and women, who were willing to sacrifice their humanity to become weapons against the darkness and there had been darkness. The Void Reapers had come from the spaces between galaxies, creatures of pure destruction that fed on sentient life. They had swept through the outer regions of the galaxy, consuming entire worlds. The Galactic Concord had been helpless against them. Their fleets had been destroyed, their armies scattered, their defenses broken, but the Guardians had stopped them. Marcus closed his eyes and remembered the war. He remembered fighting in the burning atmosphere of dying stars. He remembered tearing through Reaper hive ships with his bare hands, his Guardian armor protecting him from temperatures that would vaporize ordinary matter. He remembered standing beside his brothers and sisters, the other Guardians, as they pushed the Reapers back, system by system, until the last of the creatures was destroyed. It had taken 50 years. Half a century of constant warfare. By the end, only 12 Guardians remained from an original force of 200. But they had won. They had saved the galaxy, and the galaxy had thanked them by destroying everything they loved. Marcus opened his eyes and looked at the screen in front of him. It showed the classified records of the Galactic Concord records that had been sealed away and hidden from all but the highest members of government. Records that revealed the truth about what had happened to Earth. The Concord had been afraid. They had watched the Guardians fight, and they had seen what humanity was capable of. They had seen humans tear through armies that outnumbered them 1,000 to 1. They had seen human technology advance at a rate that made other species look like primitives. They had seen a young civilization barely out of its infancy become the most powerful force in the galaxy, and they had decided that humanity was too dangerous to exist. The conspiracy had been planned in secret, discussed in hidden chambers by the leaders of a dozen species. They had waited until the war was over, until the Guardians were exhausted and scattered across the galaxy. Then they had struck. The weapon had been a virus, a biological agent designed specifically to target human DNA. It had been released simultaneously on Earth and on every human colony world. Within weeks, it had infected billions. Within months, it had destroyed human civilization. The virus did not kill. That would have been too obvious. Instead, it attacked the human brain, destroying the neural pathways responsible for advanced cognitive function. Scientists, engineers, artists, leaders, all of them reduced to mindless shells. Only the simplest functions remained. Only the most basic instincts. The survivors had forgotten everything. They had forgotten how to build ships, how to read, how to maintain their technology. Within a generation, they had forgotten they had ever been anything more than primitives scraping out survival on a dying world. The Guardians had tried to help. Marcus remembered receiving the distress calls, remembered racing back toward Earth at faster than light speeds. But the Concord had been waiting. They had blockaded the solar system with 1,000 ships. They had told the returning Guardians that Earth was under quarantine, that a plague had broken out, that nothing could be done. Marcus had not believed them. He had tried to break through the blockade, and they had shot him down. He remembered the pain of his ship exploding around him. He remembered falling toward Earth, his armor protecting him from the heat of atmospheric entry. He remembered crashing into the ocean, sinking down into the dark waters, and somehow impossibly surviving. He had crawled into the Citadel, the last of the Guardian strongholds, and he had activated the stasis system. He had told the Citadel's artificial intelligence to wake him when it was safe, when the blockade was gone, when he could fight again. He had not expected to sleep for 10,000 years. Marcus turned away from the screens and walked toward the exit. The Citadel was coming back to life around him, lights activating, systems powering up, robots emerging from storage to begin repairs. But he could not stay here. He needed to see Earth. He needed to see what had become of his world. The Citadel had an exit that led to the surface. Marcus walked through a long tunnel that sloped upward, his footsteps echoing in the darkness. After nearly an hour, he saw light ahead, natural light. The golden glow of a sunrise. He emerged from the tunnel onto a rocky beach. The ocean stretched out before him, blue and endless under a clear sky. Birds called to each other in the distance. Waves crashed against the shore. It was beautiful, peaceful, as if the horrors of the past had never happened. Marcus walked along the beach until he reached a small village. It was primitive wooden huts, cooking fires, simple tools made of stone and bone. The people who lived there looked up as he approached. They were human, but they wore animal skins and carried wooden spears. They looked at his armor with fear and confusion in their eyes. These were his people, the descendants of the civilization that had once spanned 1,000 worlds. Reduced to this. "Do not be afraid," Marcus said. He spoke slowly, clearly, using simple words. "I am not here to hurt you." An old man stepped forward from the group. He was the village elder Marcus guessed, the leader. He studied Marcus with suspicious eyes, but he did not run. "What are you?" the old man asked. "Where do you come from?" "I come from the water," Marcus said. It was easier than trying to explain the truth. "I have been sleeping for a long time. I woke up and came to find you. Are you a spirit? A god?" Marcus shook his head. "I am human, like you. I am just different." The old man seemed to accept this. He invited Marcus into the village and gave him food and water. Marcus sat with the people and listened to their stories. They spoke of hunting and fishing, of births and deaths, of seasons and storms. They knew nothing of the stars. They knew nothing of the galaxy that existed beyond their sky. They knew nothing of what they had once been. And that, perhaps, was the cruelest part of the Concord's crime. They had not just destroyed human civilization. They had erased it. They had made humanity forget that they had ever been anything more than animals. Marcus stayed with the village for 3 days. He learned their language, a simplified version of an ancient earth tongue, and he studied their way of life. They were good people, he realized. Kind and generous, despite their primitive existence. The virus had taken their knowledge, but it had not taken their hearts. On the 4th day, a ship appeared in the sky. It was a Cathari vessel. Marcus recognized the design from the archives. It descended toward the village, its engines roaring, and the villagers screamed in terror. They had never seen anything like it. They thought the world was ending. Marcus stepped forward and raised his hand. "Stay calm," he told the villagers. "I will handle this." The ship landed on the beach, and a squad of soldiers emerged. They were Cathari, the same species as the commander who had awakened him. They carried weapons and wore combat armor. They looked at the primitive humans with contempt in their eyes. "There he is," said the squad leader, pointing at Marcus. "The creature from the citadel. Command wants him captured alive." Marcus did not move. He stood perfectly still as the soldiers approached, their weapons aimed at his chest. He counted them, 12 in total, armed with plasma rifles and personal shields. Standard Cathari military equipment. "You are making a mistake," Marcus said calmly. "Turn around. Go back to your masters. Tell them that Earth is under my protection." The squad leader laughed. "Protection? You are one human. We are a galaxy-spanning empire. You have no power here. I warned you," Marcus said. "Remember that." He moved. The guardian armor responded to his thoughts, liquid metal flowing across his skin and enhancing his already superhuman abilities. He was faster than the eye could follow, stronger than any machine. He crossed the distance between himself and the soldiers in a fraction of a second. The battle lasted 4 seconds. When it was over, 12 Cathari soldiers lay unconscious on the beach. Their weapons were destroyed. Their armor was torn apart. They were alive. Marcus had not killed them, but they would not be fighting again anytime soon. Marcus looked at the villagers, who were staring at him with wide eyes. Fear and wonder mixed together on their faces. They did not know what they had just witnessed. They did not understand what he was. "Do not be afraid," he said again. "I am here to protect you. That is what I was made for." He turned to the Kethari ship and walked toward it. The pilot was still inside, cowering behind the controls. Marcus knocked him unconscious with a single blow and took command of the vessel. Within minutes, he was ascending into orbit, leaving the village behind. But he did not leave Earth, not yet. He guided the ship toward the citadel and landed on the surface above it. Then he began to work. The citadel's systems were old, but still functional. Marcus had designed them himself, 12,000 years ago, to withstand anything. Now he activated them all: the defense satellites, the weapon platforms, the sensor arrays. He connected himself to the network and felt the power flow through him. And then he accessed the Citadel's most important function, the Awakening Protocol. The Guardians had known that they might not survive the war against the Reapers. They had planned for the possibility that humanity would need to defend itself without them. So they had hidden something in the DNA of every human on Earth, dormant genetic code that could be activated. When the time was right, Marcus activated it. Across the planet, in villages and caves and primitive settlements, humans felt something change inside them. It was subtle at first, a tingling sensation, a moment of clarity, a flash of memory from a life they had never lived. But it would grow. Over time, the dormant genes would activate fully, and humanity would begin to remember what they had once been. It would take years, perhaps decades, but eventually, the children of Earth would rise again. Marcus looked up at the stars and smiled grimly. The Galactic Concord had tried to destroy his people. They had tried to erase humanity from existence. But they had failed. And now the Guardian was awake. And he was going to make them answer for what they had done. Far away, in the heart of the Concord, the leaders of the galaxy were gathering. The transmission from Earth had spread across every world in known space. The message was simple, just a few words announcing the Guardian's return, but its effect was devastating. Species that had not feared anything in 10,000 years were suddenly terrified. Admiral Thigen of the Keth-Uri Dominion stood before the High Council, his scales gleaming under the bright lights of the assembly chamber. He was young, by galactic standards, only 300 years old. He had never seen a Guardian. He had grown up believing that they were myths, exaggerations, legends invented to frighten children. "This is absurd," he said, his voice filled with contempt. "One human, one primitive from a dead world. We are the greatest military power in the galaxy. We command fleets of 10,000 ships. What can one human possibly do against us?" The Orm-Dash ambassador rose from its seat. It was ancient, so old that no one knew exactly how many years it had lived. Its crystalline body shifted and sparkled as it moved, light refracting through structures that were older than most species. "You do not understand," the Orm-Dash said. Its voice was like music, each word a perfect note in an endless song. "You did not see the Guardian Wars. You did not watch them fight." "I have read the reports," Thiessen said dismissively. "Enhanced soldiers with advanced armor. Impressive, perhaps, but nothing that modern weapons cannot handle." "The reports are lies," the Orm-Dash replied. "We destroyed the true records. We erased the evidence of what the Guardians could do. We did this because we were afraid. Because we knew that if future generations learned the truth, they would understand why we did what we did." The chamber fell silent. Every eye turned toward the ancient ambassador. "What truth?" someone asked. The Orm-Dash's body flickered with sad, pale light. The Guardians were not soldiers. They were not warriors. They were weapons, living weapons designed to end wars permanently. I watched a single Guardian destroy a fleet of 500 ships in less than an hour. I watched 2 Guardians hold a planet against a Reaper swarm that numbered in the millions. I watched them tear through the fabric of space itself to reach their enemies. It paused, and when it spoke again, its voice was heavy with old fear. We did not destroy humanity because they were weak. We destroyed them because they were strong. Because we knew that if they continued to grow, they would surpass us all. We killed them because we were afraid of what they would become. Admiral Thiesen's face had gone pale, but he straightened his spine and lifted his chin defiantly. "That was 12,000 years ago," he said. "Times have changed. Our technology has improved. Surely we can handle 1 Guardian now. Can we?" The Ormdash asked. "Then, why are your hands trembling, Admiral?" Thiesen looked down at his hands. The ambassador was right. He was shaking. "Send your fleet," the Ormdash said. "Send your ships and your soldiers. Attack Earth if you dare. But do not say you were not warned. Do not pretend that you did not know what you were facing." It settled back into its seat, its crystalline body dimming. "The Guardian has returned, and the galaxy will burn for what we did to his people." The chamber erupted into chaos. Representatives shouted at each other, accusations flying, old alliances crumbling. Fear spread through the assembly like a virus, infecting every mind it touched. And far away, on a small blue planet at the edge of known space, Marcus Kane looked up at the stars and waited. They would come for him. He knew that. The Concord could not allow him to exist. They would send their ships and their armies, and they would try to destroy him. They would fail, because Marcus was not just a soldier. He was not just a warrior. He was a Guardian, the last of his kind, and he had been designed for one purpose: to protect. The galaxy had forgotten what that meant. They were about to remember. Admiral Thiesen stood on the bridge of the Dominion's Wrath, the largest warship in the Cathari fleet. Through the viewport, he could see Earth growing larger as his armada approached, a blue and green marble floating in the darkness of space. It looked peaceful, harmless, just a primitive world with primitive people. But Thiesen's hands were still trembling. He hid them behind his back and tried to focus on the task ahead. The High Council had given him command of 300 warships, dreadnoughts, and cruisers and destroyers, carrying over 1 million soldiers. It was the largest military force the Cathari had assembled in centuries. More than enough to conquer any world in the galaxy, but more than enough to destroy 1 human. "Admiral," said his tactical officer, "we are entering weapon range. Shall I begin targeting the surface installations?" Thiesen nodded. The scans had revealed thousands of energy signatures across Earth's surface satellites in orbit, weapon platforms on the ground, defense stations hidden beneath the oceans. The Guardian had activated an ancient military network that the Concord had believed destroyed long ago. "Target everything," Thiesen ordered. "Leave nothing standing." The fleet spread out into attack formation. Weapons charged across 300 ships, preparing to unleash destruction on a scale that would turn the planet's surface to glass. Thiesen felt a grim satisfaction. Whatever the Guardian was, whatever he could do, he could not stand against this much firepower. No one could. And then the sensors screamed a warning. "Admiral," the tactical officer shouted. "Contact." Single target, moving toward the fleet at impossible speed. On screen, the main display flickered, and Thiesen saw something that made his blood run cold. A figure was flying through space. Not a ship, a person. A human in armor that gleamed like liquid silver, moving between the stars as if gravity and vacuum meant nothing to him. He was coming directly toward the fleet, his speed increasing with every passing second. "That is impossible," someone whispered. "Nothing can survive in vacuum without a ship. Nothing can move that fast." But the Guardian was doing both. Marcus Kane felt the cold of space against his armor and ignored it. He felt the radiation of the distant sun beating against his skin and ignored that too. His Guardian armor was more than protection. It was an extension of his body. A second skin that could survive conditions that would destroy any ordinary material. He had been designed to fight wars in the hearts of stars. A little vacuum was nothing. He scanned the approaching fleet and counted the ships. 300 vessels, arranged in a standard attack formation. Heavy weapons, strong shields, experienced crews. By any normal measure, it was an overwhelming force. Marcus smiled. They did not understand what they were facing. They could not understand. The Concorde had destroyed all records of the Guardian Wars, erased all evidence of what the Guardians could do. These soldiers had never seen a Guardian fight. They thought they were hunting a primitive creature from a dead world. They were about to learn the truth. Marcus accelerated. Space bent around him as his armor manipulated gravitational fields, pushing him faster and faster until he was moving at speeds that conventional physics said were impossible. The fleet grew larger and his vision, individual ships becoming visible, weapon ports glowing as they prepared to fire. He reached the first ship in less than 3 seconds. Destroyer was called the Swift Claw. It carried 2,000 soldiers and enough weapons to glass a continent. Its captain had exactly enough time to see Marcus approaching before the Guardian tore through the ship's hull like it was made of paper. Marcus phased through the outer armor, his Guardian abilities allowing him to become temporarily intangible and materialized in the reactor room. The engineers had no time to react. He moved among them like a ghost, his hands finding control panels and ripping them apart. The reactor went critical in seconds. He phased out of the ship just as it exploded. On the bridge of the Dominion's Wrath, Admiral Thiessen watched the Swift Claw die. The explosion was visible across the entire fleet, a brilliant flash of light that left nothing behind. 2,000 soldiers gone in an instant. What happened? Thiessen demanded. What destroyed that ship? Unknown, Admiral. Admiral. The Guardian. He went inside it. He phased through the hull somehow, and another explosion. Then another. Then another. Marcus was moving through the fleet like a force of nature. He did not fight the ships from outside, he destroyed them from within. He phased through hulls and materialized in engine rooms, weapons bays, bridge compartments. He tore apart critical systems with his bare hands. He moved so fast that by the time one ship exploded, he was already inside the next. The Cathari tried to fight back. They fired their weapons, filling space with plasma bolts and energy beams. But Marcus was too fast. He dodged between the attacks, phasing through projectiles that came too close, using the explosions of dying ships as cover. In the first minute, he destroyed 15 ships. In the second minute, he destroyed 20 more. Retreat, Thiessen screamed. All ships retreat. Get us out of here. But it was too late. The fleet was in chaos. Ships were trying to turn and run, but they were crashing into each other, their formations collapsing. The Guardian was everywhere at once, appearing and disappearing, leaving destruction in his wake. And then the satellites activated. Marcus had not been fighting alone. While he kept the fleet occupied, Earth's defense grid had been charging. The ancient satellites that orbited the planet, thousands of them, hidden among the debris of 10,000 years, suddenly came to life. They turned their weapons toward the Cathari fleet and opened fire. The beams that struck the ships were unlike anything the galaxy had seen in millennia. They passed through shields as if they did not exist. They burned through armor like it was ice in sunlight. Ships that were trying to escape were cut apart by weapons they could not block or avoid. Marcus landed on the hull of a cruiser and punched through the metal with his fist. He tore open a hole and dropped inside, into the chaos of a battle that the crew was already losing. Soldiers fired at him with their rifles, but the plasma bolts bounced off his armor without leaving a mark. He moved through them without killing. He did not need to kill. He disabled them instead, breaking their weapons, cracking their armor, leaving them unconscious but alive. He had no desire for slaughter. He wanted them to survive. He wanted them to go home and tell their masters what they had seen. Another ship exploded behind him. Then another. The defense satellites were doing most of the work now, targeting engines and weapon systems with surgical precision. Ships that might have escaped were crippled instead, left drifting helplessly in the void. Admiral Thyssen watched his fleet die. Ship after ship disappeared from his tactical display, their signals cutting out as they were destroyed or disabled. In 7 minutes, he had lost half his armada. In 10 minutes, he had lost 3/4. How is this possible? He whispered. His scales had gone pale with fear. How can one human do this? No one answered. There was no answer to give. Marcus finished disabling the cruiser's weapons and phased back out through the hull. He looked around at the battlefield, at the wreckage of destroyed ships, at the drifting hulks of disabled vessels, at the few survivors still trying to flee. The battle was almost over. He turned his attention to the Dominion's wrath. The flagship was the largest ship in the fleet, a massive dreadnought bristling with weapons and protected by shields that could withstand a nuclear explosion. Admiral Thyssen had ordered all remaining power diverted to defense systems. He thought it would save him. He was wrong. Marcus flew toward the flagship, accelerating the speeds that turned him into a blur. The ship's point defense systems tried to track him, but he was too fast. He zigzagged between the weapon emplacements, dodging fire that filled the space around him. And then he phased through the hull. He materialized on the bridge. The officers around him screamed and reached for their weapons. But Marcus moved first. In 3 seconds, every armed person on the bridge was unconscious. Only Admiral Thyssen remained standing, backed against the far wall, his eyes wide with terror. "Please," the Admiral whispered. "Please, do not kill me." Marcus walked toward him slowly. His armor was covered in scorch marks and scratches, evidence of the weapons fire he had taken during the battle, but he was unharmed beneath it. He stopped in front of Thyssen and looked down at the trembling reptile. "I am not going to kill you," Marcus said. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "I want you to live. I want you to go home. I want you to tell them what happened here. Tell them." "What?" "Tell them what you saw. Tell them that I destroyed your fleet in 13 minutes. Tell them that I could have killed every soldier on every ship, but I chose not to. Tell them that I am not interested in revenge or conquest. I only want to protect my world." He leaned closer, and his eyes burned with cold intensity. "But also tell them this. I remember everything. I remember what the Concord did to my people. I remember the virus they released, the civilization they destroyed, the billions of lives they ended. I have not forgotten. I will never forget." He straightened and stepped back. "Earth is no longer quarantined. Earth is protected. Send another fleet, and I will not show mercy again. Send armies, and I will destroy them. Come to my world with weapons, and I will teach you what the Guardians were made for." He turned and walked toward the viewport. Through the transparent material, he could see Earth floating in the darkness, beautiful and blue and alive. "Oh," he said without looking back. "Take your survivors and leave. Tell the galaxy that the Guardian has awakened. Tell them that Earth remembers." And then he phased through the viewport and disappeared into space. Admiral Thiessen stood alone on the bridge of his crippled flagship, surrounded by the unconscious bodies of his officers. Through the viewport, he could see the wreckage of his fleet, 240 ships destroyed or disabled, over 1 million soldiers dead or wounded, the greatest military force in Keth-Ari history reduced to burning debris in less than 15 minutes. And one human had done it all. Thiessen slumped against the wall and closed his eyes. The Awakens ambassador had been right. The old records had been lies. The Guardians were not soldiers or warriors or enhanced fighters. They were something else entirely. He activated the emergency beacon and waited for rescue ships to arrive. He would do as the Guardian commanded. He would go home and tell them what he had seen. He would describe the battle in every terrible detail. And he would pray that the Concorde was wise enough to listen. Because if they sent another fleet, if they tried to attack Earth again, Thiessen knew what would happen. The Guardian would not show mercy twice. He would come for them, not just their ships, but their worlds. He would burn through their defenses like fire through dry grass. He would not stop until they were destroyed. The humans had created the Guardians to end wars. And now the galaxy was about to learn what that meant. Far away, in the halls of the Galactic Concorde, the transmission arrived. Every council member, every military leader, every citizen with access to a screen watched the footage from Admiral Thiesen's flagship. They saw the fleet arrive at Earth. They saw the Guardian emerge from the planet's atmosphere. They saw the battle unfold in horrible, impossible detail. 13 minutes. 300 ships. One human. The recording ended with Marcus Kane standing on the bridge of the Dominion's Wrath, delivering his message to the galaxy. His words echoed through council chambers and military headquarters and private homes on 10,000 worlds. Earth is protected. Send another fleet, and I will not show mercy again. For a long moment, no one spoke. The galaxy had believed itself safe. They had believed that the age of the Guardians was over, that humanity was extinct, that the old terrors would never return. They had been wrong. The Awakens ambassador broke the silence. Its voice was soft, almost sad. I warned you, it said. I told you what the Guardians were capable of. I told you that you could not defeat them with fleets and armies. Then what do? Demanded a Vethmer representative. We cannot simply allow this creature to threaten us. We cannot let humanity rise again. Why not? The Awakens asked. We destroyed them once because we feared what they would become. And what did our fear accomplish? Nothing. They survived. He survived. And now he is angry. It rose from its seat, its crystalline body catching the light. Perhaps it is time to try a different approach. Perhaps it is time to make peace with the humans instead of war. Perhaps it is time to face the consequences of what we did and accept responsibility for our crimes. The chamber erupted into argument. Some species called for peace. Others demanded war. Old alliances shattered as fear drove beings to say things they would never have said before. But one thing was certain. The galaxy would never be the same. The Guardian had awakened. The lost Guardian of Earth had announced his return. And the galaxy stood frozen in fear, waiting to see what would happen next. On the surface of Earth, Marcus Kane sat on the beach where he had first emerged from the Citadel. The sun was setting over the ocean, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Waves crashed gently against the shore. He was tired. Not physically. His Guardian body did not experience fatigue the way normal humans did, but emotionally. He had killed no one in the battle, but he had caused so much destruction. He had proven that he was everything the Concorde feared. And yet, he had to do it. He had to show them that Earth could not be conquered. He had to make them afraid enough to leave his world alone. He looked up at the stars, wondering what would come next. The Concorde would not give up. They would not simply accept his warning. and leave Earth in peace. They would scheme and plot and plan, looking for a way to destroy him. But Marcus was patient. He had waited 10,000 years. He could wait a little longer. And while he waited, he would prepare. He would rebuild Earth's defenses. He would awaken the dormant potential in humanity's children. He would create a new generation of guardians, not weapons of war, but protectors of peace. The galaxy had tried to destroy humanity. They had failed. And now humanity was going to rise again. Marcus smiled and closed his eyes, listening to the sound of the waves. For the first time in 10,000 years, he allowed himself to feel hope. The future was uncertain. Dangers still lurked in the darkness between stars. But Earth was protected. Its people were beginning to awaken. And the Guardian was watching over them all. Whatever came next, humanity would face it together. And they would survive. They always had. The news of the 13-minute war spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Every species, every world, every citizen with access to a communication device learned what had happened at Earth. They watched the recordings over and over, unable to believe what they were seeing. 300 warships, destroyed by a single human. The galactic concord fell into chaos. Old alliances crumbled as species, turned against each other, blaming one another for the conspiracy that had destroyed humanity 12,000 years ago. The Cathari Dominion demanded revenge for their lost fleet, but no one wanted to join them. The Vethmer withdrew from the Council entirely, sealing their borders and refusing to communicate with anyone. The Skull Hive mind fractured into competing factions, each arguing about the best way to respond to the Guardian's return. And through it all, the eldest species watched with something like despair in their ancient hearts. The Ambassador, whose name was Crystalline Song of Morning Light, returned to its homeworld after the council meeting. It was tired of politics, tired of fear, tired of watching younger races repeat the mistakes of the past. It had lived for nearly 1,000,000 years, and in all that time, it had never seen anything like the terror that now gripped the galaxy. But it remembered the Guardian Wars. It remembered watching the humans fight against the Void Reapers, their bodies blazing with power that should have been impossible. It remembered the moment when it realized that humanity was something special, something that could change the galaxy forever, if given the chance, and it remembered voting to destroy them. That decision haunted Crystalline Song. It had been afraid, like all the others. It had seen humanity's potential and felt threatened by it. It had chosen safety over justice, survival over honor. Now it wondered if there was still time to make amends. It sent a private message to Earth, a simple greeting, an offer of friendship, a hope for peace. It did not know if the Guardian would respond. It did not know if he would ever forgive what the Concord had done. But it had to try. Marcus Kane received the message in the Citadel's communication center. He read it 3 times, analyzing every word for hidden meanings or threats. But there were none. The Ambassador was sincere, genuinely wanted peace. He did not respond immediately. He had too much to do. In the weeks following the battle, Marcus had thrown himself into rebuilding. The Citadel's manufacturing facilities came back online, producing robots and materials and technology that the galaxy had not seen in 10,000 years. He used these resources to repair Earth's damaged ecosystems, to clean the pollution left behind by the collapse, to restore the planet to the paradise it had once been. But his most important work was with the humans themselves. The awakening protocol he had activated was spreading through the population. Every day, more humans began to show signs of the dormant genetic potential that the Guardians had hidden in their DNA. Some developed enhanced physical ability, strength, speed, endurance far beyond normal human limits. Others showed increased intelligence, their minds suddenly capable of understanding concepts that had been beyond them before. A few even began to manifest stranger abilities, the power to sense energy fields, to manipulate electromagnetic forces, to interface with electronic systems through thought alone. Marcus gathered these awakening humans and brought them to the Citadel. He taught them how to control their new abilities. He explained what had happened to their ancestors, the truth about the collapse, about the Concord's conspiracy, about the Guardians who had once protected the galaxy. Some were angry when they learned the truth. Others were frightened. But all of them understood the responsibility that came with their new powers. They were the first generation of a new humanity, the children of the survivors, rising from the ashes of a civilization that had been deliberately destroyed. Marcus named them the Inheritors. He did not make them soldiers. He did not train them for war. Instead, he taught them to build, to create, to heal. He showed them how to construct shelters using Guardian technology, how to grow food in the most barren environments, how to generate clean energy from the sun and wind and waves. He wanted them to rebuild Earth first, to prove that humanity could rise again without becoming the conquerors that the galaxy feared. But he also prepared them for the possibility of conflict. He taught them self-defense, tactics, strategy. He showed them how to use the Guardian armor system, simpler versions of his own suit, designed to protect without transforming the wearer into a weapon of mass destruction. He made sure they understood that violence should always be the last resort, but that they should be ready to defend themselves and their world if necessary. As the months passed, Earth began to transform. Cities rose from the ruins of ancient settlements, built with technology that blended the old and the new. Schools opened, teaching the Inheritors and their families about history, science, art, and philosophy. Medical centers healed diseases that had plagued the primitive tribes for generations. The population began to grow again, no longer limited by the harsh conditions of survival. And across the galaxy, beings watched with a mixture of wonder and fear. The transmission from the Ormdash ambassador was not the only message that reached Earth. Dozens of species sent communications, some threatening, some curious, some seeking alliance. Marcus read them all but responded to few. He was not ready to trust the galaxy. Not yet, but he knew that he could not isolate Earth forever. The universe was full of dangers, and humanity could not face them alone. Sooner or later, he would have to make contact with the rest of civilization. He would have to decide whether to seek revenge or reconciliation. The answer came from an unexpected source. 6 months after the 13-minute war, one of Earth's long-range sensors detected something at the edge of the solar system. It was small, barely larger than a shuttle, and it was damaged. Its engines were failing, its hull was cracked, and its life support systems were on the verge of collapse. Inside the vessel were 3 survivors, an Ormdash, a HFY, and a Vethmer. They had been part of a research expedition to the outer reaches of the galaxy, studying ancient ruins left behind by civilizations that had vanished long ago. What they had found there had sent them fleeing back toward Concord space. Desperate to warn anyone who would listen, Marcus intercepted their distress signal and brought them to Earth. He healed their injuries and repaired their ship. And then he listened to their story. The Void Reapers had returned. The 3 survivors spoke in terrified voices, describing what they had seen at the edge of the galaxy. A fleet of ships, massive beyond imagination, emerging from the darkness between the stars. Creatures of pure destruction, feeding on the energy of living worlds. The same monsters that the Guardians had defeated 10,000 years ago, but changed, evolved, stronger than before. They wiped out an entire colony in a single night, said the Ormdash researcher. 12 billion lives, gone without a trace. We barely escaped. We tried to warn the Concord, the Cathari added, but they did not believe us. They said the Reapers were extinct. They said we were lying. They are not extinct, Marcus said quietly. They were never extinct. They retreated to heal and grow strong. They have been waiting for the right moment to return. The three survivors stared at him with hope and fear in their eyes. Can you stop them? The Vethmer asked. The stories say that the Guardians defeated the Reapers once. Can you do it again? Marcus was silent for a long moment. He thought about the war he had fought so long ago, the battles, the sacrifices, the friends he had lost. He had been part of a force of 200 Guardians then. Now he was alone. But he was not truly alone. On Earth, the inheritors were growing stronger every day. In the Citadel, ancient weapons and ships were being restored. And throughout the galaxy, there were beings who wanted peace, who wanted to stand against the darkness. I cannot stop them alone, Marcus said finally. No one can. The Reapers are too many, too powerful. But together, with all the species of the galaxy working as one, we might have a chance. He stood and walked to a window that overlooked the ocean. The sun was setting, painting the water in shades of gold and crimson. I did not want this, he said. I did not want to fight another war. I wanted to rebuild my world, to help my people rise again, to live in peace. But the Reapers will not give us that choice. They will come for Earth eventually, just as they will come for every world in the galaxy. We can either face them together or die separately. He turned back to the survivors. Take your ship. Go back to the Concord. Tell them what you saw. Tell them that the Guardian offers an alliance, not to conquer, not to rule, but to survive. Tell them that Earth's children are awakening and that we will fight beside anyone who stands against the Reapers. They may not listen, the Ormdash said. Many species still hate and fear humanity. I know, but we have to try. The alternative is extinction for all of us. The survivors left Earth the next day, carrying Marcus's message to the galaxy. He did not know if they would succeed. He did not know if the Concord would overcome its fear and hatred long enough to accept his offer. But he had to try. For Earth, for humanity, for all the lives that would be lost if the galaxy failed to unite. The first attack came without warning. A colony world on the edge of Concord space, home to 12 billion souls, fell silent in a single night. No distress signals, no warnings, no survivors. When rescue ships arrived 3 days later, they found nothing but empty cities and scorched earth. Every living thing on the planet had been consumed, not killed, but devoured. Their life energy drained to feed the hunger of the Void Reapers. The second attack came a week later. Then the third. Then the fourth. The Reapers moved through the outer territories like a plague, destroying everything they touched. Fleets sent to stop them were annihilated within hours. Defenses that had protected worlds for millennia crumbled like sandcastles before a rising tide. Species that had never known fear suddenly understood what it meant to face extinction. And in the great halls of the Galactic Concord, the leaders of the galaxy finally accepted the truth they had been trying to deny. They could not win this war alone. The envoy ship arrived at Earth on a cold morning in late autumn. It carried representatives from 20 different species, some who had supported the alliance, others who had opposed it, and many who had simply waited to see which way the wind would blow. They came in humility, dressed in plain clothes instead of ceremonial robes, carrying no weapons, making no demands. They came to beg. Marcus met them on the beach where he had first emerged from the Citadel. Behind him stood a group of inheritors, young humans whose awakened abilities had transformed them into something more than ordinary mortals. Their eyes glowed with subtle energy, and the air around them seemed to shimmer with power that the aliens could not quite see, but could definitely feel. The leader of the delegation was a Keth Ari named Kethval, the grandson of Commander Zeval, the treasure hunter who had accidentally awakened Marcus so many months ago. He walked forward slowly, his hands visible and empty, his head bowed in a gesture of respect. "Guardian," he said, "we come seeking alliance." "I offered alliance 6 months ago," Marcus replied. "Your people refused. We were afraid. We were foolish. We thought we could fight the Reapers ourselves." HFY's voice cracked with emotion. "We were wrong. Billions have died already. Billions more will die if we do not act together." He fell to his knees in the sand. "Please, help us. Not for our sake. We know we do not deserve your mercy after what our ancestors did to your people. But there are children on those worlds. Innocent lives that have done nothing wrong. Help us save them." Marcus was silent for a long moment. He looked at the delegation, at the fear in their eyes, the desperation in their postures, the broken pride in their bowed heads. These were beings who had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. They had never kneeled before anyone done. Now they kneeled before the last guardian of Earth. Part of Marcus wanted to refuse. Part of him wanted to turn away and let the galaxy burn, to watch the Reapers destroy the civilizations that had destroyed humanity. It would be justice. It would be revenge for 10,000 years of silence and suffering. But that was not what the Guardians had been created for. "Stand up," Marcus said quietly. "All of you, stand up." The delegation rose, confusion and hope mixing on their faces. "You destroyed us once," Marcus continued. "You released a virus that erased our civilization. That reduced our people to primitives, scraping out survival on a dying world. You did this because you were afraid of what we would become. You chose extinction over coexistence." He paused, and his eyes swept across the assembled aliens. "I could let the Reapers destroy you now. It would be justice for what you did to us. It would be fair." The delegation held its breath. But Guardians do not serve justice. We do not pursue fairness. We serve life. All life. Marcus's voice grew stronger, firmer, filled with purpose. The Guardians were created to protect the galaxy from threats that no single species could face alone. That is what I was made for. That is who I am. And I will not abandon that purpose, no matter what crimes were committed against my people. He extended his hand toward Kethful. "Earth will fight beside you. We will stand against the Reapers together. Not as servants, not as conquerors, but as allies. Partners in the defense of all that lives." Kethful took his hand and shook it. Tears ran down the reptilian's scaled cheeks. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you." Marcus nodded. "Gather your fleets. Send them to these coordinates." He transmitted a data file to the delegation ships. "My people are preparing something that may give us a chance against the Reapers. But we need time, and we need protection. Can you give us that?" "We will give you everything we have," Kethful promised. "Every ship, every soldier, every resource at our disposal." "Good. Then let us begin." The alliance formed quickly after that. Ships from dozens of species gathered around Earth, creating a defensive perimeter that protected the planet while the inheritors prepared for war. Engineers from 100 worlds worked together to build new weapons, new shields, new technologies that combined the best of each civilization. And in the citadel beneath the ocean, Marcus opened the deepest vaults. The Guardian fleet had been hidden for 12,000 years, sealed away before the collapse to protect it from the virus that destroyed human civilization. 30 ships, each one carrying weapons and technology that made the Concord's most advanced dreadnoughts look like children's toys. Ships that could phase between dimensions, that could fold space around themselves, that could unleash energies capable of destroying stars. Marcus did not activate them all. Most were too dangerous, too destructive, too likely to cause catastrophic damage to the fabric of space itself. But he awakened 10 of them, the most balanced, the most controllable, the most suitable for the battle ahead. He assigned each ship to a crew of inheritors, humans who had trained for months to handle the awesome power they would wield. They were young. The oldest among them was barely 30 years old, but they had inherited the potential of their ancestors. They would have to grow into their roles quickly, because the galaxy had no time for gentle learning. When the fleet was ready, Marcus gathered them on the deck of the lead ship, a vessel called the Hope Eternal. They looked at him with trust in their eyes, trust that he would lead them wisely, trust that the sacrifice they were about to make would be worth it. "I will not lie to you," Marcus said. "Many of you will die in the battle ahead. The Reapers are powerful, more powerful than they were when I fought them before. We are facing an enemy that has destroyed civilizations, consumed worlds, extinguished entire species. Victory is not guaranteed." He paused and looked at each of them in turn. "But neither is defeat. We are the children of Earth, the descendants of a civilization that once stood against the darkness and won. We carry the legacy of the Guardians, not just in our blood, but in our hearts. We fight not for conquest, not for revenge, but for life. For all the beings in this galaxy who deserve a chance to survive." He raised his fist. "The Reapers think the galaxy is weak. They think we are divided, afraid, easy prey. Let us show them how wrong they are. Let us stand together, human and alien, young and old, weak and strong, and remind the universe why the darkness should fear the light." The inheritors cheered, their voices rising in a roar that echoed through the ship. Around them, the Allied fleet added their voices. Thousands of ships, millions of soldiers, all united for the first time in galactic history. They were ready. The battle began at the edge of a system called Kethris Prime, the homeworld of the Kethari Dominion. The same species that had sent the fleet to destroy Earth. The Reapers had chosen their target deliberately, aiming to crush one of the most powerful civilizations in the Concord, before moving on to consume the rest. The enemy fleet was massive beyond imagination. Thousands of ships, each one grown from organic materials, each one pulsing with stolen life energy. At their center was the Hive Mother, a vessel so large that it dwarfed planets. A living machine that served as the brain and heart of the entire Reaper swarm. The Allied fleet emerged from hyperspace, directly in the path of the Reaper advance. 10 Guardian ships led the formation, their hulls gleaming with energy that seemed to bend light itself. Behind them came the fleets of the Concord Kethari dreadnoughts, Vethmer cruisers, Orm-Dash carriers, and ships from 100 other species. It was the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history, and at the front of them all was Marcus Kane. He flew through space without a ship, his guardian armor wrapping him in protective energy. He had done this before, 10,000 years ago, leading his fellow guardians into battle against the same enemy. Back then, he had been one of 200. Now he was nearly alone, but not entirely alone. Behind him, moving in perfect formation, were the inheritors, the first generation of new guardians, wielding powers they had only begun to understand. They were not as strong as Marcus. They were not as experienced. But they had something that he had lacked in the old war. They had hope. The battle began with fire, and fury. The Guardian ships opened fire first, their weapons tearing through Reaper vessels with surgical precision. The Allied fleet followed, filling space with plasma bolts and energy beams that lit up the darkness like artificial suns. Reaper ships exploded by the dozens, their organic hulls rupturing as the combined firepower of the galaxy struck home. But the Reapers were not easily defeated. For every ship that fell, 3 more took its place. They fought with mindless determination, throwing themselves at the Allied fleet without fear or hesitation. Their weapons, beams of pure life-draining energy, cut through shields and armor, consuming everything they touched. Ships began to fall on both sides. Kethari dreadnoughts exploded, their crews dying to buy time for others to escape. Vethmar cruisers were swarmed by smaller Reaper vessels, dragged down through sheer numbers. Even the Guardian ships took damage, their advanced technology strained by the relentless assault. Marcus fought like a force of nature. He phased through Reaper hulls and destroyed them from within, just as he had done to the Kethari fleet at Earth. But there were too many. For every ship he destroyed, 10 more appeared. The Reapers seemed endless, their numbers replenished by the Hive Mother's constant spawning. "We cannot win like this," Marcus said over the communication channel. "We need to destroy the Hive Mother. Cut off the head, and the body will die." "The Hive Mother is protected by thousands of ships," replied Admiral Thason, who had been given command of the Kethari forces despite his defeat at Earth. "We cannot get through to it. Watch me." Marcus accelerated toward the center of the Reaper swarm. Enemies closed around him from every direction, their weapons filling space with deadly energy. He dodged and weaved, phasing through attacks he could not avoid, destroying ships that got too close. The Inheritors followed, their own powers blazing as they fought to keep up with their mentor. They lost 3 Inheritors in the first wave, then 2 more in the second. Marcus felt each death like a physical blow, but he could not stop. He could not slow down. The Hive Mother was ahead, and everything depended on reaching it. The Allied fleet surged forward, following Marcus's path through the swarm. Ships fell on both sides, but inch by inch, they pushed closer to the heart of the enemy. The Reapers fought with increasing desperation. Sensing the threat to their mother, Marcus reached the Hive Mother's hull and phased inside. The interior was like nothing he had ever seen, a living machine, pulsing with stolen life energy, filled with organic technology that defied understanding. The walls were made of something like flesh. The corridors were veins carrying power throughout the massive structure. And at the center, deep within the heart of the ship, was the consciousness that controlled the entire swarm. Marcus fought his way toward it, destroying everything that stood in his path. Reaper drones attacked him in endless waves, but he cut through them without stopping. His armor burned with power that he had held back during the battle outside. Now he released it all. He reached the central chamber and found what he was looking for. The Hive Mother's brain was a massive organic structure, suspended in a web of neural connections. It pulsed with the combined consciousness of every Reaper in the swarm, a mind so vast that it had consumed entire civilizations. So ancient that it had watched galaxies grow old and die. It spoke to him in a voice that echoed through his thoughts. "Guardian, you should not have returned. Your kind was destroyed. Your people were scattered. You were supposed to remain asleep forever." "Things change," Marcus replied. He raised his hand and energy gathered around his fist. "We have evolved beyond what we were when you last faced us. We are stronger now. You cannot defeat us. Maybe not." Marcus smiled grimly. "But I can try." He struck. The explosion was visible from space. The Hive Mother shattered, its massive hull cracking apart as the consciousness at its center was destroyed. Throughout the swarm, Reaper ships suddenly went still, their connection to the Mother severed, their purpose lost. They drifted aimlessly, their organic systems shutting down without the guiding intelligence that had controlled them. The Allied fleet fell upon them without mercy. The battle lasted 3 more hours, but the outcome was never in doubt. Without the Hive Mother, the Reapers were just animals, dangerous, but directionless. The combined forces of the galaxy hunted them down one by one, destroying every last ship until not a single Reaper remained. When it was over, the survivors gathered in orbit around Kethra's prime. Ships from 100 species floated side by side, their crews exhausted but alive. They had lost nearly half their forces, millions of soldiers, thousands of ships, but they had won. The Void Reapers were destroyed, this time forever, and floating at the center of the formation, Battered and burned but still alive was Marcus Kane. He had nearly died inside the Hive Mother. The explosion had torn through his armor, damaged systems that would take months to repair. But he had survived. He always survived. That was what Guardians did. The peace that followed was fragile at first. Old hatreds did not disappear overnight, and many species still viewed humanity with suspicion and fear. But the shared victory over the Reapers had created bonds that could not be easily broken. Soldiers who had fought side by side could not return to being enemies. Leaders who had watched humans sacrifice themselves to save alien worlds could not pretend that humanity was a threat. Slowly, carefully, the galaxy began to change. Earth became a symbol of hope, a world that had been destroyed and risen again, whose people had been reduced to primitives and awakened to become protectors of all life. The inheritors spread throughout the galaxy, using their abilities to heal and build and create. They helped rebuild the worlds that the Reapers had damaged. They brought Guardian technology to species that had never dreamed of such wonders. They taught and learned and grew. Marcus watched it all with pride and sadness in equal measure. The war was over, but his work was just beginning. There would always be threats in the darkness, always dangers that required protection. That was the burden of being a Guardian. But he no longer carried that burden alone. A year after the battle, Marcus stood on the balcony of a great hall on Kethris Prime. Below him, representatives from every species in the galaxy had gathered to sign a new treaty, not the old Galactic Concord, but something different, something better. An alliance based on cooperation rather than domination, on trust rather than fear. Kethvol stood beside him, watching the ceremony with something like wonder in his eyes. "My grandfather would not believe this," the young Cathari said. "A year ago, we were trying to destroy you. Now we are signing treaties of friendship." "Time changes things," Marcus replied. "People change things. Your grandfather made a mistake when he awakened me, or maybe he made the best choice of his life. It depends on how you look at it. He died 3 months ago, you know, peacefully in his sleep. His last words were about you. What did he say?" Kethvol smiled. "He said he was glad he found you. He said the galaxy needed a guardian, even if it did not know it." Marcus looked down at the gathering below. Humans and aliens stood together, talking and laughing and sharing stories. The Ormdash ambassador was teaching a group of young inheritors about the history of its species. A Cathari general was discussing tactics with a human commander. A Vethmer scientist was explaining crystal technology to a crowd of curious listeners. It was not perfect. It would never be perfect. There were still prejudices, still fears, still old wounds that would take generations to heal. But it was a beginning, a foundation upon which something better could be built. "What happens now?" Kethvol asked. Marcus smiled, the same smile he had felt on the beach a year ago when he had first allowed himself to hope. "Now we build something better. The Guardians were created for war, but war is not the only thing we can do. We can protect, yes, but we can also help. We can teach. We can guide. We can make sure that the next 10,000 years are better than the last." He looked up at the stars, visible through the transparent ceiling of the hall. The galaxy once stood frozen in fear when the lost Guardian awakened. I think it is time to give them something else to feel. What is that? Hope. Below them, the representatives began to sign the treaty. One by one, species that had been enemies for millennia pledged to work together for a better future. It would not be easy. Nothing worth doing ever was. But they would try, and perhaps with time and effort and a little bit of the hope that Marcus had spoken of, they would succeed. The lost Guardian of Earth had awakened, and the galaxy would never be the same.